So we're here from the Digital Democracy Project. We're talking with Jennifer Adams. She's running for U.S. House District 7 in Florida, and we're here to learn a little bit more about her legislative priorities. How are you doing today, Jennifer?
Great, John. How's it going?
It's going well. So we were looking at your website here and learning a little bit about your candidacy, and we wanted to kind of figure out who you were and what kind of policies you advocate for. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, first off, really glad to be here. I think the work that Digital Democracy is doing is really important for transparency and for people to be able to kind of quickly understand and engage on how their representation is, how it's not, and what kind of policies they care about and can learn more about. So appreciate you having me on. So I'm running in Florida's 7th Congressional District, which is Central Florida, just north of Central Florida. It's all of Seminole County in the southern half of Volusia County. And it's where I grew up and where I live, raising my family. And I stepped up to run against an incumbent, first-term incumbent who doesn't live in the state of Florida, doesn't share our core values here in the district, which is reflected in his voting record, which is a failing grade according to Digital Democracy, 62%. And really because we deserve and we need better representation, and everybody here in this district does, for somebody who can represent all of us. And so as somebody who lives here, who understands community, who has been engaging in it and leading advocacy for groups like the League of Women Voters, who has served on a lot of different advisory boards, and somebody who's helped write and pass bipartisan legislation here in Florida. Yes, it is possible to get people to come together and do great things. I stepped up to run in this district, and we're within the margin of error to win and take this seat in November.
Yeah, it's definitely, it seems like the national election is going to have a huge effect on down ballot races. And I think that it's, everything's kind of in the margin of error right now. It really seems kind of up in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. I think that there was a lot of energy and excitement that was tapped into when Kamala and Walz, became the presidential nominees. And it gave, Americans, Floridians, another option.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the policies that you advocate for? What are some changes that you think we need to make to, Florida State or even the country at large?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody, whether it's Floridians, whether it's Americans, we all have things that we have more in common than we don't. So pocketbook issues are really important to me. I'm a mom. I have children. I'm a caregiver, and so things like childcare and caregiving being more accessible, more affordable. We're the only one of the only developed countries that doesn't have an infrastructure that's set up to support caregiving. And so that's something that would actually be a huge economic boost to our economy by the tune of trillions of dollars. And so, the child tax credit policy that we had before was great. That was, putting monthly funds into people's accounts, because I don't know about others, but I haven't found any childcare that lets you pay them in arrears like a year or more later. So being able for people to get that money when it's needed is really important. So that's a big one. Making sure that we have good job growth and that pay is compensated not only at a livable wage, but also making sure that we're paying people equally for equal work. That's another big issue. And then in addition to that, really making sure that we have more affordable and quality healthcare. expanding Medicare, making sure that we protect Social Security, making sure that we are being proactive in our healthcare policies, covering, dental and eye. I mean, all of these things that actually save money in the long run are really important. And then making sure, obviously, that that we have reproductive rights and freedoms. Women making their own decisions about their own bodies and healthcare, and families being able to determine when and how they're going to have a family or not. So those are some of the main issues. In addition, immigration, that's something that is not an easy thing to improve, but it's something that we need to address. We need to secure. We need to improve the process. We need to make it more timely, effective, and efficient. Those are all things. And then, having healthy and safe communities. And for instance, I mean, we just had another tragedy happen with preventable responsible gun ownership, right? So, really making sure that we're doing a better job as a community, taking care of people, mental health care, the internet, social media, making sure that that there, like, we have guardrails for our children and for adults in our mainstream life. Just because it's on a phone or a computer doesn't mean it doesn't impact people. And so just making sure that we're doing things and being considerate and compassionate, collaborative, and using common sense to do all of those things is really what's driving our campaign and is resonating across the party lines.
Absolutely, man. You brought up so many good issues there. There's so much to touch on. So, I think you started with economics. I think that one's really important. That one's really close to a lot of people right now. So I know there have been a lot of talk about inflation and the cost of living skyrocketing so quickly, and I think that there were some proposals with. I think Kamala Harris wanted to do something about setting prices or something like that. What are some of your solutions for those problems?
Yeah, I really think on the economic level, I think that, I talked about childcare and caregiving. I really think that doing that child tax credit is one way. I also think that making it possible for every American to own a home is really, really important. So, nobody's really addressing the issues of our credit scores and those credit bureaus. So I think really looking at that and looking at how people are scored on their credit. If people get divorced, or you have determination of debt, and a court orders certain people to pay for that debt, if that person doesn't pay, a person that is no longer legally obligated to pay for that still gets dinged on their credit score. So, these are things that, looking at like the entire landscape of how things are, I think is really important. Like here in Florida, we've had a ton of growth, right? We've had, on a daily basis, thousands of people coming to live in the state. Well, we need to think about our planning. We need to think about, where do we need to have extra density in our cities, in our communities, and how do we plan for that, right? How can we utilize some of the infrastructure that's already there to coordinate, right, between municipalities, counties, federal government. We're updating the infrastructure, making sure that all of those dollars that are coming down from the federal government, how are they being spent? Are they being spent wisely? Those are the kinds of things where having more communication, using technology in ways that are effective, that are efficient, and utilizing our small businesses in those communities so that our middle class is strong and we don't keep going farther and farther apart from the top, and to the bottom, I think are all really, really important ways to be able to do that, and then to help those small businesses be able to scale and be able to get the support and get it in a manner that is quick and speedy, so that they're not, lagging and having to continue to go into debt for years to be able to finally get ahead. Because as I'm a small business owner, and it's really tough sometimes to be able to scale and to take on work, if you haven't gotten paid for it yet, or you haven't been able to be in business long enough to get the loans that you really need to set up an infrastructure to have the staff and things like that. So it may not sound sexy, but it's simple, that it doesn't need to take a heavy lift. It just needs to make sense. It just needs to be coordinated. And those are things that I think people like me who understand it, who go through it, are really needed at all levels of government, particularly right now in Congress.
Yeah, I completely agree. You bring up a lot of really good points. And I think that, it's interesting because I think I was talking to Carlos Guillermo Smith a while back. He's a state senator in Florida, and he's running for state senate in Florida, and he
He
was
won.
talking about
He won.
a
Yeah.
oh, did he win? Did he win?
Yeah.
Good for
He
him.
won unopposed. He ran unopposed. So
Oh, nice.
he's a
So he
senator
was
elect.
nice. Good for him. I'm very happy for him. So he was talking about a tax that existed that I guess it's sort of a tourism tax that you guys have in Florida, and it was supposed to generate extra revenue. To I guess the theory was that you would reinvest in the infrastructure, because generally the infrastructure is built around the size of the community that you have. But when you have all this tourism, you're using that infrastructure at a faster rate than you would with whatever the relative community size would be. And so this additional tax was supposed to be in community reinvestment. But I think by law, it was stated that you had to spend at least 70% of that tax just on advertising for new tourism. And so even though they were collecting the tax revenue, they weren't actually reinvesting it in the places that it was going. So I think that you were bringing up about reinvesting and making sure that all of our stuff is taken care of. And I think, yeah, a lot of times people don't understand what's actually happening behind the scenes. And yeah, it's not sexy, but we have to coordinate. We have to make sure that everything's working together and working the way that it's supposed to.
Absolutely.
So you had also brought up healthcare a couple times. Could you tell me a little bit about some of the healthcare solutions that you see that are possible, and what changes we need to make to that system?
Absolutely. Well, we have in our country, we're not a quality based healthcare system, right? And what I mean by that, right, it's more of a numbers system, right? It's like, it's not how you're treating, it's how many. And so I think number one is we have to pivot to how well we're treating patients, and really making sure that, again, there's effectiveness, and that it's efficient, because ordering a bunch of tests that are not hardly needed doesn't make any sense, right? So I was talking to an elderly couple that I'd met at a senior living center, and they were really frustrated because they were spending so much of their time going to all these different doctors for something that typically could be resolved by going to one doctor, right? And it was,
Mm,
going to this doctor to then get a pass
especially,
to go to this,
yeah.
specialist. But then before you could go to this specialist, you needed to get a bunch of testing done.
Hmm.
And so there's all these, gaps in the system, but then it's exhausting for people to have to not only do all these things, but even have the time. I mean, what if you're working, you have kids, you've got, other things, or it's just physically taxing, or these people are all over the place. How are you able to get to all these places, especially if you have mobility issues? So I think number one, first and foremost, it should all be coming from the patient's perspective, and from caring for the patient. The patients we shouldn't be having to jump through hoops, and we should also make sure that we're giving the nurses and doctors the ability to diagnose patients in a way that they're accustomed to, not the insurance companies determining what that looks like, right? So
Yeah.
I think there are these kinds of things that definitely need to happen. And like here in Florida, I mean, when you start taking away the ability for experts, people who are medical providers, when the government starts telling them what to do and they've got no knowledge about anything, that's a problem, right? So I'm talking about
Yeah.
reproductive freedom, right? And to then start telling doctors and patients that we're going to imprison you if you do something that would help save the lives of your patient, or do something that is that goes along with what medical care is. We're losing doctors, and we need more doctors and nurses, not the other way around. We have more people coming into the state. We have more doctors leaving the state. That's not a healthy and safe community, and that's only going to drive the cost of healthcare up in Florida. On a federal level, though, it applies, because reproductive freedom, women are able to make their own healthcare decisions. So legally, we need to do that. So, definitely making Roe the law of the land again, but also codifying the Equal Rights Amendment into our U.S. Constitution. We're the only democracy post World War II who does not have equal rights in our country's constitution. So, ensuring that our laws are protected, our rights are protected equally, regardless of sex, is something that 100% they've already passed in the states. They just need to be codified and put into the U.S. Constitution, and that would alleviate a lot of those issues as well. But I really think that whenever there's a supermajority of any state or of any entity or organization or board, there's never going to be the best outcome for everybody. And so that's how our democracy, and why our democracy was created, right? To have the balance of powers, right? We learned that in elementary school. And then being able to have those checks and balances is really important, and be making sure that when we're making laws, that while, that's why we have the separation of church and state, because if my set of beliefs don't align with somebody else's beliefs, that doesn't make that shouldn't make a difference, because that's not what government is there to do. That's, we learned this in our textbooks, and we know this is how our country was founded. So I really think just getting back to the basics is super important. It's also an economics issue, because we're going to have more healthcare needed. We're going to have less doctors. More people are not going to be productive. Children, or people who have been experienced horrible cases, of rape, or been, are pregnant and physically can't have a child. I mean, these are things that are already happening, and they're barbaric, and people need to, and it's shown, right? We have Amendment 4 on the ballot here in Florida, which is the protecting the right, because Florida is one of the states that does not have the ERA protected in our state constitution. It almost was. It was one vote shy back in, I think, the late 70s. So that can be another avenue in addition, to protect a lot of other things, because it's not just reproductive freedom in the sense of an abortion, birth control, and IVF, and a lot of other things. But in terms of the ballot initiative, there is overwhelming support for protecting the right to reproductive rights in the state of Florida. And it is a tripartisan issue, I will say, because I'll include independents on that for sure.
Yeah.
So, I think if that's the case, if we have had a supermajority here in Florida, The extremism people are over. And that's why I stepped up to run for this seat too. The incumbent is an extremist who was said he was glad that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And these are things that the constituents in this district and Florida's 7th, they don't align with by the vast majority. And so that's not a representative government. So that's my long answer back, and I probably touched on a few other things that maybe you were going to talk on. So hopefully that
No,
helped.
it's totally fine. I love hearing you. I love hearing you talk about all these things. I think that it's really interesting to kind of see how you see all the different moving parts of this, because I mean, I think that kind of really points towards what direction you're going to try and go whenever solutions are proposed. And it's interesting because as you were talking about all these issues with healthcare, there was one thing that really stuck out to me. And you said that you've got so many doctors leaving and you've got, so many people coming in, and this healthcare is going to be more and more necessary over time. So it seems like a problem that's going to continue to grow larger and larger and larger until we do something to address it. And I really agree with a lot of the things that you said. But I also know that it's very difficult to legislate a lot of these things. So, as an example, we were talking about some of the difficulties that people might have making healthcare decisions, and that it's kind of between them and their doctor. And then when you've got legislators coming in, they have to write this like blanket law that just kind of applies to everybody. And so you've got a group of people who aren't medically trained, who are trying to come up with a one size fits all law to everybody, and there's a lot of really unintended consequences. So kind of, I'm a little bit of a policy wonk. I really like to focus on like legislation, what it means, some of the loopholes that might exist. How do you think that we might legislate some of these things that you were talking about? Like what kind of things do you think need to be in the law itself to ensure some of these protections? You brought up the
Yeah, no, it's
ERA. The ERA was really, but if you put the ERA in the Constitution as an amendment, it seems like there's still a ton of room for interpretation. So as you get more and more specific down to like individual behaviors and things like that, where do you see the legislation going, and what kind of things do you approve of?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, so our US Constitution is vague on purpose, right? Because there's the changing of the times, right?
Agreed.
And so yeah, so that's meant to be vague. However, when you get into the legislating part of it, there's another piece that people don't engage in enough, in my opinion. And so I come at this as I you know I started off, I was a competitive athlete, and then I was a sports broadcaster for a little bit, and then was a small business owner. And then, had children, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And when the courts didn't work to protect my kids and myself, I knew that I had to do something different, because if it was happening to me, it was happening to others.
Yeah.
And somebody had said to me at, during that time, that span, that, well, because I was like, this is the law, really? This is a bad law. Like, this makes no sense. And they said, well, you know who writes the laws, don't you? And I was like, oh. And it was like this aha moment, in terms of these are lawyers. These are people that are they wanted this, they wanted that. They weren't in it. They weren't
Yeah.
experiencing it. They didn't understand it, of the real world applicability of it. They were coming at it from their lens, right? And so I went back to school and I got a master's degree in policy, and then I got another master's degree from Washington University in St. Louis's College of Law and Legal Studies. And then I became a Florida Supreme Court certified circuit court mediator. And I say all of that because I have a very good understanding of the process, right? And that's how I was able to help get Grayson's Law passed last year. And so the other part of legislating is the rulemaking process. And that's where that implementation part happens, right? So even if you have a horrible bill, sometimes you can make it a little bit better through the rulemaking side, and that happens through the administrative rulemaking process, right? And then sometimes when you have a great bill, it can become a not so great bill, depending
Mm,
upon how that implementation goes. But people, by and large, do not engage in the rulemaking process. It's not easy to engage in the rulemaking process.
Yeah.
So because there's all these, it gets published, and then you've got a short amount of time to make comments, and so it's not a full engagement. But you can engage in it, and people should. And so that's where I think there's a ton of room for improvement, is working with, I think because when I have worked on legislation and I have engaged in it on the congressional level, and I would say, okay, well, now who's doing the implementation? Or, like, somebody that's working on the bill should be continuing on to be that subject matter
Yeah.
expert and give that background and history and knowledge. That's not how it usually works. It goes over, and then the rulemaking process happens, and it's like, so all of that work and knowledge that have gone into writing the legislation, for the most of the time, is not there when it goes into the implementation. So that's where I think there's a lot of room for improvement on that, to make sure that the implementation is aligning with the spirit of the bill. And I think that would help eradicate a lot of the duplicativeness or contradictory laws that are on the books. There needs to be more routine audits of the laws, because if there are things that are still in the statutes that shouldn't be, right, or that conflict. I mean, some states do a better job of it than others. It kind of just depends who's in charge, and how their government's set up. So those are, again, they're not sexy, but they're structural, they're organizational, they're important, and it also it withstands from administration to administration, right? I mean, if you have a good process, hopefully a bad administration, or if not if you don't have a great legislators, sometimes it can withstand that, right? So
Yeah.
but it takes ongoing engagement, and that's not something that the public always is able to do. But it's important, and I think people have realized what happens when we take our eyes away from making sure that things are going how they're supposed to, and are engaging, because we have found ourselves where we are now, like, very have some very extreme people elected, and our country is not an extreme country. So the majority of voices right now are not being heard, and that's what we have as Floridians, as Americans, the opportunity to correct in November. So everybody should make sure that they're registered to vote. Everybody should make sure they know where they're supposed to go vote. Everybody should do their research, which you guys are doing an awesome job at helping with, to making sure that they know what and who the people are who are running, regardless of what their party is, so that they can make an informed decision. And yes, it takes time, but things that are worthwhile do usually take time.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Man, you said so many really interesting things there. So I want to bring up the rulemaking process. You're absolutely right, and I have to say I'm probably guilty of this. I think that it's really easy to focus on the laws that are being proposed, and it's really easy to focus on, let's even say, the spirit of the law, right? You had brought that up earlier. But it is possible that if there's this rules making process that people are unaware of, that law could, let's say, have its teeth filed down, or that law could be more or less effective than it was intended to be when it was passed, and that uh, it can be interpreted in such a way that either makes it more or less effective than what was intended when they voted on it. And that's interesting. That I do think that people definitely need to be not just aware but involved in that rules making process. And I wonder if there's a place where digital democracy can kind of expand over time into helping be involved with that process as well. Because we're doing our best to try and make people aware of what laws are being proposed, and it's really easy to say, "Oh yeah, that law got passed," or "Yeah, that law didn't get passed. We're done." But that's not the end, is it? And I think that really that speaks to the importance of people that are not only educated on the process itself, but educated on being able to understand, what these words mean, what the long-term consequences are, what interpretations could be had, and things like that. So in that sense, in that the importance of understanding the process, the importance of understanding the implications and the long-term consequences of your laws, how do you feel about term limits? Because from what I come to understand, Florida has term limit laws that only allow you to be in office for a certain amount of time, and then you can no longer run for that office. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
I think term limits are good. I think they are. I think it gives opportunity for new people to come in, and ideally you hope that it has like a mentoring um you know feel to it, and rhythm, and almost like a progression. I think that's important. Yes, you could have a great person that's representing you and then get a not so great. Um, However, if it is more difficult for people to have an opportunity if there aren't term limits. And ideally, you want a government that is of the times, right? I mean, so in Congress or in business or in school, if you have somebody that is of a completely different era, sometimes talking to another generation, like I know with my kids, they the lingo that they use, I'm like, can you tell me? I don't no clue what that is, because it's not really a word, but it is a word, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's this was bussin', or well, spill the tea. I mean, all these things, right? And so if you're having a disconnection in the communication, that's how that's kind of where I'm talking about on the real world, implications for having term limits. We've got some people in Congress who have been there decades. We have people that die in Congress.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and people can die at any age. However, if you're really up there and you're, it's that's not that you're not really serving your community, right? You're not really serving your constituents. And so I think term limits should be had in Congress as well. I am not a big fan of having state reps or congressional reps run every 2 years. I think they should be in term a little bit longer. Like at least 3 years, right? I
Interesting.
mean, yeah, because then so much of that person's time is spent campaigning for the next election. um you know you're not I don't think that the representatives able to do their best job representing the constituents, either. So I think by and large, I think term limits are very, very important for sure. And I think also another area that would be looking at what they're specifically, probably more on the state level, but for instance, in our state in Florida, we have a very strong governor, the way it's set up, right? And every state's a little different, how their legislature is set up, how they can put out ballot initiatives. And I think on Congress on the same way, like, okay, how do people get assigned to committees? What are the rules for qualifying for federal office? What's the financing look like? Um, you know, uh, Really, really, campaign funding needs to be looked at as well. That's if we want to have equal representation, and really make it a true democracy. There's a lot of hurdles. We have less than 7% moms with school age children representing us in Congress in America. And we still have a disparity with women and men being, with their being represented. It's a little under 1 in 4 women. So, and it's because of how we don't have a caregiving childcare system set up. Women, there are men that are caregivers, but by and large, the majority of them are women. And so I really think I think that's another area, within term limits is, well, who can even just be able to run, for office, to be able to serve. who can afford to run for a state house or state Senate seat in Florida? They don't get paid a lot of money. So,
Yeah.
I think there's lots of things, again, not sexy, but like kind of the basics and fundamentals of how things are set up. And I don't think a lot of people know, because I wouldn't have ever known until I had it really negatively impact my life. And we have policy impact us all of the time, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you have homeowners insurance skyrocketing, like in some cases 5,000%, and you people can't afford their homes anymore out of nothing that they did here in Florida. How is that fair? How is that a democracy? And that's policy. That's elections. People say, I don't care about politics. Well, do you care about what the price of your insurance is? Do you care about having the ability to make your own healthcare decisions? Well, then you care about politics, or
Then you
if you
care
don't,
about
you should.
politics.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that people, they're going to have to take the time to do it when they can. And it's also, I think, important for people who are elected, people who are in positions of leadership at all levels, to recognize that and start championing a change, right? Just because something always has been doesn't mean it always should be. And so I know the majority of everybody that I talk to, and that's thousands of people knocking on doors, making phone calls. They are ready, and we need some fresh, positive, innovative ideas and refreshing leaders who are not afraid to be to stand up and have conviction, who aren't afraid to stand up and really say it like it is, and who are able to also work with people who may not agree 100%, because I don't know anybody who agrees with anybody 100% of the time, and be able to work through it. And because at the end of the day, we all live in the same country. We all are in neighborhoods. We all can come together to go to a sporting event, or to go hear a concert, right? Things that really impact our lives, we 100% should be able to come together for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really good defense of term limits. I've always been a little bit wishy washy on term limits, because I understand. I think that your arguments are really important, but also I think that some other people have made some arguments which were like, they feel like when they're hitting their term limit, they feel like they've just finally figured out the process. They've just finally figured out how it all works, and now they can really be effective. And yet they're almost arbitrarily taken out. And I think that that mentorship that you were talking about, that I think that there's probably not enough of that. That there's not enough knowledge being passed from one person to the next, and that may be a problem with party politics. That may be a
Hmm.
problem with some of the maybe the stratification. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that
Yeah,
problem might be solved.
I definitely, two-party system is not ideal. Other countries, they do it differently. Every country does things a little bit differently. I'm a community ambassador for the Department of State, and so what that means is, I give presentations and have conversations and meetings with um, young leaders from different countries on different kinds of topics, and it's really interesting to have conversations and compare what things are on in their country, how things are going well or not so well, and how they're addressing that, or how they have addressed these things. And um, that's mentorship, because that's purposeful, right? I mean, that's meaningful, and that's how we can come together and come up with new ideas and pivot. I mean, our structure of two parties, um, you know, it's been around, a while. And I think in terms of letting go of control and power, that's a really hard thing to do, and most
Yeah,
people don't do that. However, being able to have, when you start diversifying then that's when you get real representation.
Yeah.
That's when it's more bottom up, and that's the grassroots kind of thing, and that's where you usually get a more reasonable, a more for the common good result. And as a mediator, I can tell you that, being innovative and coming up with really what's the goal, what is it that you really want to happen, and asking those questions, because I can tell you, having led advocacy for a lot of different, um, groups on different issues, it's fundamentally sometimes missed. Like, what is it you all really want? Like, if you could have anything, what is it you want? And it's amazing how often there isn't an answer. It's
Yeah.
and so I think people should really, start thinking about it, instead of what do I don't like? What is it I don't like? What is it
Yeah.
that I can't stand? What is it? And start, like, shift it in your head, right? Do the paradigm shift. What is it that I want? What is it
Yeah.
that we need? What are some solutions, right? So then we can start being more solution focused, and instead of being, the hateful rhetoric, and just being pessimistic. We know, as intelligent, common sense children, adults, doesn't matter, that being a pessimist is not going to lead you to anything but more pessimism, right?
Yeah.
So, I think having a paradigm shift in that sense is what's happening, because it has to. Like, when things break, you have to start putting them back together, and I think that
Yeah.
that's where we're at. And I'm really appreciative, to be able to have the opportunity to run for this, seat, and to be able to represent my community where I grew up, and to have that opportunity to give back, and help make the world a better place for my kids, and the generations to come, because that, for me, is what it's all about.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you bring up such a good point because it's so easy to be oppositional. It's so easy to criticize and be a critic, but it's a lot harder to sit down and think up like, hey, how would we actually solve a problem and what are we actually looking for out of this solution? It almost seems like we're constantly engaged in the fight for the fight's sake and not necessarily focused on ending the fight and figuring out how to actually fix things. I read something interesting a while back, and it seemed like mathematically, the way first past the post voting works is that you slowly pare down to two main parties. That a two party system is inevitable in a first past the post system, and that it almost seems to force you into a position to be strategic with your vote, and it almost seems to position us so that we have to vote against the party that we don't want as opposed to voting for the people that we do want. Because if you vote for third party candidates or something like that, you're almost making it easier for the candidate you least want to win. And so, therefore, I guess my question would be, to make a long story short, if do you propose any changes to our voting system? Do you think that we should move to ranked choice voting? Do you think that first past the post is where we need to stay, or are there other voting systems that you've heard of that might be more effective?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's not such a quick and easy answer, right? Because there's a lot of moving
Of course.
pieces to these things. But I definitely think, in, like, municipal races where they have the ranked choice voting, I definitely do think that you end up getting who the ultimate winner would be, right? So I think that definitely is a good way to go. I don't know how I haven't seen where that, they've used it for a larger race, you know, past like a municipal race, but I do think that, um so for instance, you know, in some countries there's more than three parties, right? I mean, here in America we have more than three parties, right? I mean, there's just a smaller percentage. But
Yeah.
in some countries, they give every, person who qualifies to run, a certain amount of money. And it's kind of like seed money, right? So then people, can at least start from the same, place, and how they use it and what they do is up to them, but at least they're not starting from nothing. So I think that's something to look at for sure, because there's enough money to make that happen. It wasn't like they need to find it, right? I mean, the parties, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so being able to, if you qualify, and I think that it would help be a better competition and give people better options, and have probably better qualified candidates want to participate, right?
Yeah,
And see
agreed.
how that goes. So, I think those would be some ways to go about doing that. The Electoral College is pretty archaic, and I think it should go away. I think the national popular vote for the president, at least, is something. If we're voting on a national office, the only one, right? Then we need to have the national popular vote, right? Because it's not every state is would then be equal in the sense of one vote is one vote. So, I think there are some things that definitely need to happen. I think we need to ensure a few things within the foundation of where our democracy is before we start messing around with it first. In terms of that, but I do think there are little things that we can do, and the national popular vote that has a lot of support to do that. I think it makes a lot more sense, and I think it would actually put less focus on just particular states, because I think all of the states are important. And so focusing on certain states because they have more electoral votes, I think would actually be a great service for the entire country and who ends up representing us.
That's actually a really good point. I didn't really think about that, but it might remove some of that gamesmanship, that focusing so many of your resources on this one particular place because it has the most electoral college votes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point. I didn't think about that. So man, we've talked about so many things here. I know that another important issue for a lot of people, especially in the state of Florida, is immigration. Can you tell me a little bit about your stance on immigration and what changes you think might need to be made there?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we all live somewhere, right? And we want to have a feel secure, and we all usually, I would think, have doors, have walls, and have. When I say that, we know where our boundaries are, right? And you know we need to secure our border. We need to also have a system that provides people who go through the process to go through it in a fair manner, to go through it in a humane manner, to go through it in a efficient and effective manner. And right now, that's not the way it is. There was legislation that had been presented, and it was derailed by Trump. That would have done a lot of those things. And the gamesmanship is just, it's ridiculous, right? And so I think securing it, we need to have funding go to it and go to an intentional way. We need to have courts that have more staff that can help process these cases. We need to do a better job of making sure that we keep track of the people who are in the system, so that they know where to go, so that they know when they have hearings, and so that it's a system that is designed to succeed instead of designed to fail, because that kind of seems like where we've been at for decades, and it's not an easy thing to resolve in a short order. However, it's something that we definitely are needing to stop messing around with the partisan politics and really starting to address, because people are either coming here because they're suffering or they want a better life. And then because it's not secure and we don't have a process, the cartels, sex trafficking, the things that go on in America already, that it's not like they're coming in here and doing it. People are already doing it, but at least it's not adding to and providing more victims because they're so desperate to come into a
Yeah.
place that they're not able to come through an effective and efficient manner. In addition, the diplomacy is very important, right? And that's where America does a good job. I think that we could do more of that in terms of really having intentional relationships. We have sports diplomacy. We have, where we engage with other countries through sport, through all kinds of things, so that it's that human element, right? And people are talking and seeing each other instead of what they think people from this country are like, or what they think people from this country are like, without even having been there. Or maybe they met somebody and that person was not a good person, but it doesn't mean that entire people that are from that country are
Yeah.
like that or
You
whatever, right?
can't
So
extrapolate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think looking at this, like, okay, let's be proactive on it. At the same time, let's look at this from like a common sense, again, perspective, right? And if people are coming here, well, we need to find out, like, well, why, or I mean, what are these root causes, and how can we help so that they're not all coming here as well? So it's dealing with the problem, but also being proactive and being like, okay, well, how can we help mitigate the need for people to all come here? And that
Yeah.
takes partnership, that takes collaboration with other countries. And being an isolationist mentality, which is what how Trump is viewing this, and other extreme politicians, that's not that's not a healthy way either. Shutting down and not wanting to engage with the rest of the world, actually, that weakens a country. That doesn't strengthen a country. So I think being able to look at this through the lens of a couple different ways, but not doing nothing is never a good answer or solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Doing nothing just allows the problem to continue to get it worse and worse and worse until it becomes almost unsolvable sometimes. So yeah, that's a really good point. So I know you've got more stuff you've got to get to. I've kept you here for so long, but can you tell me a little bit about we were so happy whenever we heard that you were endorsing the Digital Democracy Project. Could you tell us a little bit about your views on the Digital Democracy Project and how you think it might help you as a House of Representatives member? I think a lot of times we focus on our state representatives and people, local governments and people being locally involved. But it's another thing to have the opinions of people in Florida while you're in a national office. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you view us and how you view our role if you were to win?
Yeah, happy to. So I think it's a great way if you can have all of the different levels in one place, right? In terms of the offices and who's in them and how they're voting and what they're voting on, and to kind of see how they align. Um, and and I, like I said earlier, I'm a real big proponent of being in coordination. And so there should be conversations that, and regardless of what party somebody is, in working together, whoever is the congressional representative, whoever is the congressional senator, whoever is the local state rep, and state senator, all the way down to your mayors, and all of these different positions should be in coordination. Same with on the governmental side, right? The state of Florida government and the different departments, with the federal. Um, you know, my the incumbent is co-sponsored one of the bills to eradicate the Department of Education. Like, this is just ridiculousness. Like, I mean, so like we have to be coordinated to have anything that runs efficiently. You need to be able to have the high view and then have the granular view, right? And so those boots on the ground are really important, right? And then it's supposed to matriculate up and down, not just one way. And so I think if people can understand and visualize what all those different levels look like in one place and get information all in one place, I think it will make more sense to people. And as a representative, it would make me be able to have a quick glance, because you guys are really good at keeping it updated too, to have a quick glance and say, hey, wait, what's going on here? What's that? Or this is, or well, oh, well, why is my district in this part, seems to be voting in a different direction? Maybe I need to have a conversation with what's going on down there. It's just like kind of having a roadmap, kind of, of how things are going, and or a barometer of what things are happening in more of a real time sense, right? Okay, so on the constituent side, I think it's really great because you can see, I feel like, where's my representative on this issue? And if they don't align with how your values and what those are, that's another way to more objectively make a decision on who I'd like to vote for, who I may not like to vote for. And it's just, I think, another tool in the toolkit for voters to be able to utilize, or to advocate, and engage in the process. If there's a bill that's up, you can be like, hey, I think you should vote this way, or hey, why did you vote this way on this? I just think it's a way to give more information in a way that is more relatable, probably, to a lot of people, than going on to onto a website where just being able to navigate the website probably takes like a PhD. So I think
Absolutely.
the usability, I think the applicability, I think the connectivity, between a lot of different moving pieces, for a lot of different areas and voters, as well as electeds, is really cool. And that it's on a digital platform is, definitely, in tune with where our society is at. And I was just really excited when I saw that this was a thing and you guys were doing this work, and because it's been much needed. And I really appreciate, everything that you guys do.
Well, we really appreciate you being involved. We really appreciate you being here for this interview. Thank you so much. It's so obvious how passionate you are, and I'm so glad that you're working so hard to get elected. We really wish you the best, everything here in this race, and I hope in the future we can have another interview.
Yep, that sounds fantastic. And if anybody wants to learn more or to connect, contribute, or join our team, you can go to jenniferadamsforcongress.com. It's been a pleasure connecting with you all. And let's go, Florida. Let's go, America. Let's go, everybody. Check out Digital Democracy, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much.